Ever wondered if following rules actually makes your daily life easier or just more complicated? Today's IELTS speaking mock test dives into rules, signs, and social behaviour.
I'm Emma Collins, and I'll be tackling questions about everyday rules, public behaviour, and social responsibility. Ready for a full IELTS-style speaking practice session?
Great, Emma. This episode covers parts 1, 2 and 3 of the IELTS speaking exam, starting with interview-style questions, moving to a long turn, then a deeper discussion. We'll wrap up with a vocabulary review and quick speaking tip.
I'm ready. Let's jump right in.
Good morning. My name is Jack Turner. Can you tell me your full name, please?
My name is Emma Collins.
Thank you, Emma. Let's talk about rules. Are there many rules in your daily life?
I wouldn't say there are loads, but there are definitely a few I have to follow. For example, there are rules at work about deadlines and how we communicate with customers. At home, it's more informal, although I try not to make too much noise late at night because I live in a flat.
Were rules important in your home when you were a child?
Yes. Quite important. My parents weren't extremely strict, but we had some clear boundaries. I had to finish my homework before watching television, and I was expected to tell my parents where I was going. Looking back, I think those rules gave me a sense of responsibility.
Do you usually read signs and notices in public places?
Usually, yes, especially if I'm somewhere unfamiliar. I tend to notice signs about opening hours, parking restrictions, or safety. I suppose I'm the kind of person who likes to know what's expected rather than accidentally breaking a rule.
Have you ever ignored a rule because you thought it was unnecessary?
Probably a minor one. I remember being in a park where people weren't supposed to walk on a particular area of grass. At the time, I thought it seemed a bit pointless, but later I realised they were probably trying to protect newly planted grass. So, yes, sometimes a rule makes more sense once you understand the reason behind it.
That's a strong example. Do you think people follow rules more carefully now than in the past?
I'm not sure. In some ways, people are more aware of rules because information is everywhere now. On the other hand, people sometimes question authority more openly, especially online. So I'd say we're probably more informed about rules, but not necessarily more willing to obey them automatically.
Now I'm going to give you a topic, and I'd like you to talk about it for 1 to 2 minutes. You'll have 1 minute to prepare, and you can make some notes if you wish. Here is your topic. Describe a rule that you think is important. You should say what the rule is, where people have to follow it, why the rule exists, and explain why you think it is important. You have 1 minute to prepare.
Okay.
All right. Remember, you have 1 to 2 minutes, so don't worry if I stop you. Please begin when you're ready.
I'd like to talk about a rule concerning noise in residential buildings, particularly the idea that people should avoid making excessive noise late at night. This is quite relevant to me because I live in an apartment building, so there are lots of people living relatively close together. In my building, residents are expected to keep noise to a minimum after around 10 in the evening. I think the rule exists mainly because everyone has a different routine. Some people get up extremely early for work, while others may have young children or simply need a peaceful environment to sleep. To be fair, I didn't think much about this kind of rule when I was younger. I used to think, well, if I'm inside my own home, I should be able to do whatever I want. But actually, living close to other people has changed my perspective. For example, one of my neighbours once played music very loudly after midnight. It only happened a few times, but it made me realise how disruptive even a small amount of noise can be when you're trying to sleep. I think this rule is important because it comes down to mutual respect. You have the freedom to enjoy your own space, but your freedom shouldn't make somebody else's life unnecessarily difficult. Of course, people don't need to be completely silent. That would be unrealistic. I think it's more about being considerate and using common sense. So overall, I'd say it's a fairly simple rule, but it helps people live together more peacefully.
Thank you. Do you think you would still follow that rule if there were no official regulations?
Yes, definitely. For me, it's more about courtesy than punishment. Even without a written rule, I'd still try to be considerate of the people around me. Would that kind of personal responsibility also be important when discussing rules in society more generally?
Absolutely. And that leads us nicely into part 3. Let's discuss rules in society more generally. Why do societies need rules?
I think the main reason is that large groups of people need some shared expectations in order to function smoothly. Without rules, everyone could simply act according to their own interests, and that could easily lead to conflict. Traffic rules are an obvious example. They restrict what individuals can do, but they also make the roads much safer and more predictable.
Should people always obey a rule, even if they disagree with it?
Not necessarily. I think there's an important distinction between disagreeing with a rule and simply ignoring it. If people believe a rule is unfair, they should be able to challenge it through legal or democratic means. Blindly following every rule can be problematic, but breaking rules purely because they're inconvenient isn't a great approach either.
Nice use of vocabulary. Why do some people seem more willing to break rules than others?
There could be several reasons. Personality probably plays a role because some people are naturally more rebellious or willing to take risks. Another factor is whether people believe the rule is fair. If a regulation seems completely arbitrary, people are much less likely to respect it. And obviously, enforcement matters too. If nobody expects any consequences, some people may decide the rule isn't worth following.
Are there too many rules in modern society?
In certain areas, perhaps. Sometimes organizations introduce rules to deal with every possible situation, and the result can be unnecessary bureaucracy. Having said that, modern life is also incredibly complicated. We have online privacy, artificial intelligence, international travel, and all sorts of issues that previous generations didn't have to regulate. So more rules aren't automatically a bad thing. The key question is whether they serve a clear purpose.
Do you think technology will make it easier to enforce rules in the future?
Yes, almost certainly. Cameras, digital records, and automated systems already make monitoring much easier. In the future, technology could make enforcement extremely efficient. However, there's a trade-off. If everything we do is monitored, people may feel that their privacy is being invaded. So governments will probably have to strike a balance between public safety and individual freedom.
What kinds of rules should children learn from an early age?
I think the most useful ones are probably related to respect rather than just obedience. For instance, children should learn to wait their turn, treat other people's belongings carefully, and understand that their actions affect others. If they understand the principle behind a rule, they're more likely to follow it even when no adult is watching them.
Thank you, Emma. That is the end of the speaking test. Let's review a few useful expressions from today's test. First, keep something to a minimum. Try repeating it naturally. Keep noise to a minimum.
This means reducing something as much as reasonably possible. For example, I try to keep distractions to a minimum when I'm studying.
Next, we heard mutual respect. Repeat mutual respect.
Mutual respect means two or more people respecting each other. It's a useful phrase for topics about families, workplaces, communities, and relationships.
Another strong phrase was strike a balance. Try saying strike a balance between safety and freedom.
To strike a balance means finding a reasonable middle point between two competing needs. For example, people need to strike a balance between work and personal life.
Finally, serve a clear purpose.
If something serves a clear purpose, it has a useful and understandable reason for existing. You could say, people are more likely to respect rules when they serve a clear purpose.
When answering IELTS Part 3 questions, avoid giving only your opinion. Try this simple structure: opinion, reason, example, contrast.
So instead of saying, rules are important, I could explain why, give an example such as traffic laws, and then add a contrasting idea like, however, too many rules can create unnecessary bureaucracy.
Exactly. That structure helps you develop your answer naturally, demonstrate grammatical range, and keep speaking without sounding memorized.